Hey, welcome back to our sweater knit along. I'm Jana with Purl Together, and if you're just joining us, welcome. You're not late. I'm late. So that's the first thing I want to talk about is I apologize for this video going up a couple days late. Life, spring, farm, kids, recitals, gearing up for graduation, all the things. Anyway, it's just life, right? We all have it. Anyway, so I apologize for those of you who've been waiting for this. In this week's video, we're going to talk about how to attach your shoulder seams, and I'll show you the 3-needle bind off for that. And then also how to pick up the stitches and knit the neckline. So I'm pretty happy about how mine's turning out. Yay! Right, before we get started with that though, I want to give a big hearty thank you to 4 new patrons we've had in recent days. The first one I'm going to pronounce hopefully sort of right. This person comes to us from the Netherlands. So thank you very much for supporting the channel to Claudine, Janet, Karen, and Mary. I appreciate your support. These videos come to you because patrons like you make that happen and help us support the costs of bringing to you content. So if you're interested in signing up to be a patron and see what I offer for your monthly pledge, head over to patreon.com/Purl Together. Now we're going to get started with the details of the sweater, shoulder connecting, and the neck bind off. And just so you know what to expect, stay tuned at the end of our little teaching segment, and I'll let you know what's coming up next week. All right, I've just finished knitting this is the left front. And so now, just like the instructions say on page 3 of the pattern, I'm going to close up the shoulder seams using the 3-needle bind off. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is take the left back here, and I'm going to, since I'm using a circular needle, I'm going to go ahead and put these stitches, take them off the waist yarn and put them onto my other end of my long circular needle. So if you have thick or fuzzy yarn like this that you're using for waist yarn, one thing that I've found works best for me is to just go ahead and put a bunch of stitches on my needle and then pull it through so that it's not as thick, and all you have on there is your waist yarn sharing the space with the cable, not the actual thickness of the needle itself. Then you can just grab a bit of the waist yarn and go ahead and pull that through. That's a lot easier for me than doing it stitch by stitch. And you might get a fiber hung up here or there especially with this. This is just a single ply bit of yarn that I had. So, it's a little bit messy, but that's all right. It's not too bad. I just do like 10 stitches at a time and then pull my needle through and then grab up the yarn and pull that through as well. So it really doesn't take very long at all. Okay. Now I have my needles both on the front and the back of the left side of my sweater. However, I'm going to do the 3-needle bind off, and I want the seam to be on the inside. So I need to turn this inside out so that we're actually going to have our working yarn on the right-hand side, and we're going to be working on the inside of the sweater or with the right sides together. Just like if you were sewing a seam on a sewing machine with fabric, you would do it with right sides together. Okay, now hopefully your stitch counts come out correctly and you have your 53, well, I'm knitting the largest size, so I have 53 stitches on each needle, and you'll need to double check whatever that is for you. And I'm getting a 3rd needle that is the same size. For me, that's a US 5. I'm using the same size as what I knitted the sweater with. So what we want to do a 3-needle bind off, it's just like it sounds, 3 needles. These 2 are both ends of my circular. And I'm going to twist everything so it's nice and straight and matched up rather than curved over. Okay, so what I'm going to do is simply take these 2 and knit them together. So I'm going to take the first stitch, take my other needle, go into both of them and knit them together. And I'm going to pull a little bit extra through just so I make sure I don't have anything that's too tight. I slip those off and I've knitted them together, so I have 1 stitch on my needle. So we're going to do that again. Knit these 2 together, bring that off. Then we want to bind off at the same time. So I'm going to take the front needle or the back, whatever is easiest for you, get a hold of that and slip it over the first stitch over the second, like a traditional bind off. So in the first, in the second, knit those two together, and then slip the back stitch over the front. In the first, in the second, knit those two together, slip the back stitch over the first. We're just going to do this 3 needle bind off all the way down, making sure to do it, you want to have tension that isn't too loose, but you certainly don't want it to cause any puckers or anything either. So that's exciting. We're seaming our shoulder together, and then 3 needle bind off is a tidy little thing. It does create a very small ridge, but it won't be noticeable, particularly when you're wearing it, and it will look nice on the right side as well. So I'll go ahead and finish this, and then I'll show you what it looks like after I get to the end, and we'll turn it right side out. And I'll show you what this looks like before I pick up stitches on the right front and back shoulder and do the same thing. Okay, I've gotten to the end and I've bound off that last stitch. I'm going to go ahead and pull this through and tighten that up a little bit. And I've left a goodly amount here just because I want to, I'll cut it, I'll trim it when I decide how I want to finish this off and then weave in my ends and so forth. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and leave that the way it is. And then you can see, let me turn this right side out for a second, or this portion of it, and you can see how nice that looks on the shoulder. Now, obviously I haven't blocked this, but yeah, you can see that looks really nice. And that creates a nice shoulder seam, and it's really not too, it does not create too big of a ridge right there. So I'm happy with that. Okay, I'm going to do the other side in the exact same way, and then we're going to talk about picking up stitches around the neckline. All right, we have finished seaming together the shoulders using the 3 needle bind off method, so that's fantastic. Now what we're going to do is pick up all the stitches around the neckline, the prescribed number, and then we're going to knit ribbing and finish off the neckline before we start the sleeves. I mean, I guess you could start the sleeves first if you want to, but I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. So the instructions tell us to start at the left front shoulder seam, and then you're going to have depending on your size, you'll have a specific number of stitches that you're going to pick up. Okay, there's a couple ways to go about picking up the correct number of stitches. You can, what I'm going to do is kind of aim for halfway here in the front, and I really feel like this is going to be, for my size, this will probably be more than 40 stitches coming along here. I'm just going to pick up however many I think I should, and then on my first round, rather than beginning with knit, purl for the ribbing, I think I'll decrease whatever I need to end up with the proper number of stitches. Now, the other thing you can do is, kind of mark this out, like this would be halfway and this would be a quarter, and see how that comes out. And if you would end up with the proper number anyway, you can kind of gauge how that's going to go. There is a mathematical way to go about this too, where you can figure out the ratio, like how many inches you have, and then figure out, like, I'm going to do 2, then skip 1, do 2, then skip 1. But the problem with that is the bind off kind of throws that off a little bit. So I'm going to just do the best I can to aim for the center, and then do it in kind of quarters like this around the front. And then I'll do the same thing around the back. So let's begin, and I'll show you what my method's going to be, and then you can see if that works for you. Because, there's always 15 different ways to do anything. So I'm going to start right here at the 3 needle bind off point, and I'm going to take a look at my side, and there, and by the way, I'm using 1 needle smaller than what I used to knit the sweater. So in my case, I'm going to pick up these ribbing stitches with a 4 since I used a 5, US 5. So I'm going to go ahead and go in under both legs of that side stitch, and that'll be, even though I messed that up right off the bat on camera, that'll be my first one. And I might kind of skip over a little past that bar. You kind of just got to space this out what you feel is best, and that might be different, for everybody, whether you're going to skip one on occasion. I'm just going to go along and pick up what feels right, and then I'm going to see how many I need to finish with, and I will decrease as needed I think that's kind of the most utilitarian way to go about it. You could certainly do a bunch of math to figure out, you know, whether you're going to like pick up 2 and then skip 1, or pick up 3, skip 1. I'm not going to be that exacting about it, to be truthful. So I just want to, you know, kind of space things out pretty well. But I've already picked up 9 there. So probably I'm going to be doing some decreasing, but that's all right. You might want to space yours out a little bit more than I am. See what works for you. You can always do it over. Whoops. And what I did just then was picked up the tail. Yeah. So I'm just going to go along and see how this works. I might end up doing it, you know, 2 or 3 times to see if I get the spacing right and see how things feel to me. But I'm just poking this in under the 2 strands, 2 legs of the side stitch, and then knitting right into that to pick it up. So nothing super fancy. I split that there though. And then sometimes you'll have a purl bump on the side. I just kind of ignore that and carry on. All right, I finished picking up the stitches across the front, and for my size, I have 12 extra stitches. So what I'll do the first time I knit around is I'll just decrease evenly spaced 12 along the front. So then I'll have the correct number for my 2x2 ribbing all the way around. So now I'm going to do the same thing from the shoulder seam to shoulder seam along the back. I just made a note of how many extra stitches along the front that I picked up, so I'll know how many I need to decrease away, evenly spaced, once I knit round the first time. Okay, now I realize the pattern doesn't call for this, but because I picked up more than was instructed, I'm going to go ahead and decrease. I'm going to knit 1 round and do some decreasing so that I do come out right for the 2x2 ribbing, which needs to be a multiple of 4. So I put this is super ugly and not my favorite stitch marker, but it was handy on my filming table here. So I'm just going to go ahead and do some strategically placed decreases where I'm just going to knit 2 together, and then I will start my 2x2 ribbing for the neckband. And then I'll show you how all that's going to look after I've gotten that established. Okay, let me show you what I've got here. I'm at the end of my bind off, and I've just pulled up this loop just to hang on to it so I don't lose it. And then I'm going to show you how I like to finish off my bind off. But as you can see, I've done my 2x2 ribbing all the way around, and then you have 2 rows of plain knit, and then your bind off. And so that little rolling action is totally intentional, as it matches the same situation that occurs at the bottom. Okay, so I have another video about this, but I'm just going to go ahead and show you here as well. So I like to pull up a pretty good loop during my this is the last stitch. So I've taken the second to the last one over the top of the last stitch to bind that off. Now I'm going to show you how I handle this. Now a lot of people will just go ahead and cut the yarn and pull that through. I don't necessarily like to do that. This will, my method will actually make this jog here less noticeable. So I'm going to take a look at where this column comes up, this knit column comes up here. And then what I want to do is take the needle and I'm going to put it in underneath both legs of that very first stitch. And then I'm going to take the loop. Now I haven't cut my yarn yet, but I will in just a moment. But I'm going to take this loop and thread the loop on the needle. And then I want to draw the loop through. Okay, now I'll go ahead and cut my tail, and I, leave like I said, I like to leave a goodly amount to be able to have the flexibility to weave it in. Now, I leave the loop here and take my tail through the loop because that's going to tighten and suck down that jog. So it's less noticeable and a little bit more even. So it's less of a, you know what I mean? Then I'll weave this in appropriately. But because we've done that, drawn it through the loop, that makes a good secure ending for the neckline. So I'm happy about that. And I'm going to try it on before I weave in any ends or anything, because if it's too tough, my bind off's too tight, or I don't really care for how it looks, or whatever, then I can easily enough undo that and take it out and have a do-over. So, but I think it's going to be good. Okay, so there's been some more questions about how to interpret the increases for the sleeves. So we're going to knit the sleeves. I'm going to make some videos for that right away because I'm starting on my sleeves as well. And so you can look for the next video about the sleeves and increasing that properly on Tuesday, hopefully Tuesday or Wednesday. But if you click the little bell notification down below when you subscribe to the channel, you'll get a notification whenever I upload a new video. Sorry about the shadows. I got a new light set up and it's kind of wonky and messed up. So, I'll go get that sorted out as well. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thank you to the new patrons. And if you have any questions, you can always post in the Facebook or Ravelry groups, and I'm happy to answer your questions there. DMing me sometimes doesn't always work out too well. Sometimes I see them, sometimes I don't. So if you ask a question publicly in those groups, then likely I'll see it. And also it helps other people because maybe they have the same question that you do. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next week.